Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, James D. Paulk, who's here to share with us his new book, Shaking Up the World, Stories of the Naval Academy Class of 1957. What happens when the best and the brightest from the Naval Academy Class 1957 go on quietly to shape history? Would you believe that no one's told their story until now? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. James D. Paulk, born and raised in Brunswick, Georgia, graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1957 and served as a naval submarine officer for 10 years. Following a 26-year career in manufacturing management with Procter & Gamble, he founded a business consulting company. His passion for marine conservation led him to successfully advocate for the elimination of destructive gill nets in California, build artificial reefs, raise white sea bass for ocean release, and write pro-angler legislation. After retiring, James became a prolific writer for fishing magazines and newspapers, a lecturer, and an active participant in fishing seminars, radio programs, and clubs, earning numerous fishing and conservation awards. After 37 years in Southern California, Jim and his wife Pat relocated to Kingsland, Georgia. So welcome to the show, James D. Paulk.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, my goodness, what a great honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, let me just say that I never had any intention to write any book. I got tricked into writing the first book. And when I completed that, a lot of people wanted me to do another book. And I said, well, I didn't do enough stupid things to do another similar book, but I so admired my classmates that I decided that I would do that book. And in June of 1953, when we all met at the Naval Academy, we were from 50 states and 6 foreign nations, and no one knew anyone else. So everyone was running around, where are you from? What did you do? And it seemed like everyone I met that night had graduated valedictorian in a high school class. They were president of the class and they were captain of the football team. And I'm thinking, I was none of those things. What in the world am I doing here? So I so admire my classmates. I just can't even describe how much I do. And that was the motivation that I wanted to do a book that we could put these stories down on paper so they would be remembered and we would have a legacy that we could pass on to not only our other classmates, but to the other graduates in the Naval Academy.
So, this book is just a phenomenal read. What would you say is the funniest story in the book?
The funniest story, okay, I would say Bob McElwee was an official in the NFL for 27 years. And when I notified the class that I plan to do a book, Bob called me on the phone. He said, Jimmy, would you like some stories from the NFL? I said, Bob, I would love. One of his stories was so funny, but I'm going to tell you one. He said his job as the referee, and he did 3 Super Bowls in 3 different decades, the only official that's ever done that. And when you see his picture in the book, you might say, oh, I remember him. But he said, when I did a game, he said, my job was to stand next to the quarterback and watch him. I did not know where the ball went. I didn't know whether it was a pass or whether it was a touchdown or anything. All I knew was to watch the quarterback and watch him all the way to the ground or wait till the play was over. But he said, when I was in Chicago, I had something extra to do. He said, first, he said, I had to do the game clock, the play clock, the formations, and the substitution. But in Chicago, I had to reach around to my back pocket and see if my penalty flag was there. If it was not there, I went to the huddle and I stood behind number 34. And I'd say, Peyton, give me my penalty flag back. And he would pull it from out of his jersey and hand it to him. He said, I'd put him in my pocket, go back, we'd start to play. Nobody in the stands or the television even saw that happen, but the people in the huddle were all laughing.
Oh my goodness. The little games that they play,
Yeah.
Oh, but and just in contrast to this, so what was the most, challenging story for you to write?
I think the most challenging story was Bobby Nevin's story. He was a hydronaut, and there are fewer hydronauts in the world than astronauts. And a hydronaut is a person that goes down deep in the ocean in a bath escape. And I had seen him do a presentation, but I had nothing on paper, and just my memory of talking with him. He helped me farm some here, and we went to American Legion meetings together, and we went to high school football games together, and we talked a little bit. So I just had my memory of this stories of his going down 11,000 feet in the ocean to examine the debris field of the Scorpion that we lost out by the Canary Islands. He was towed in a ocean going dry dock with the Trieste 2 was in the well deck, and the White Sands dry dock had 200 people on board and had a big crane so they could lift this bath escape up and put it in the water. They could take it out and put it back in the well deck so they could service it. And they had to load tons of iron ingots in there in order to get it to sink. And it was loaded with aviation gas, but that was pumped out in a long hose where it was well out in the water, and because it was very dangerous, but the aviation gas was very light and it gave it buoyancy to go up. So Bobby was started this escapade in San Diego, and the tugboat that pulled him was named the Apache. And so the Apache, the White Sands, and the Trieste, and Bobby went south, and they went through the Panama Canal and up to Mayport, Jacksonville to resupply, and then out to the dive point where they had pinpointed hydrographically with hydrophones where they thought that it was. And then Bobby went down. It took hours to go down and hours to get up. And this bath escape had a little window in it that was plexiglass 16 inches thick. But he drove the thing from behind the plexiglass over to one side where he was watching a television screen. So he was operating it from a scope rather than looking out the window. But they went down and examined the debris field, and that was challenging because I didn't have anything other than my memory. But I had Google, and I got to tell you, I Googled a lot in this book. I did a lot of research with Google. His son gave me all the dive reports, so I had the official Navy dive reports, but I didn't really use them much. And he gave me some photographs, and then I got more information for the Naval Undersea Museum in San Diego. So putting all that together was the most challenging thing that I had to do in the book.
Now, as you were compiling these stories, and I'm sure your teammates have been reaching out to you, your former classmates have been reaching out to you, was there one that surprised you?
Yeah, I think the one that surprised me was Walt Mucout's story. There are probably 4 or 5 stories in this book that would make a great movie. And I didn't know Walt's story at all. He was born in 1933 in Shanghai, China. His father was a retired chief quartermaster from the Navy and worked at the embassy. Well, when the Japanese moved into northern China and started moving south, the bombs started coming down in Shanghai. and then the family had to get out of there. So they got on a ship and they went to the Philippines. But you know what happened? The Japanese were soon in the Philippines. The the details in this story are unbelievable, and I won't tell all of them. But a bomb hit the house where they were staying. They lost everything. A bomb hit his place of work, and all the people there were killed while they were in the air raid shelter. But they were told when the army surrendered and went on the Bataan Death March there in the Philippines, they actually gave some things to the soldiers as they were marching, but they were told they were to go surrender too. So they surrendered to the Japanese. Japanese initially thought that his father was a spy and he was interrogated intensely. And then eventually they were put into a prisoner of war camp for civilians, which is called an internee camp, and they were internees. And they moved around several places. And then at the end of the story, they were rescued by Army raiders that parachuted in and coordinated with the Filipino guerrillas. They killed the 75 guards, got the people into Amtraks, which are vehicles that go into water and on land. They loaded in 200 internees in that and got them back to water across the bay and behind U.S. lines. But there's so much story here that I didn't know anything about at all. But I was so intrigued with this story. And when he did it, he said, Jimmy, don't shorten my story. I want every word in there. Well, I edited it a little bit, but I didn't shorten it too much. He was adamant that he wanted his complete story, and it was a good one because it was his mother and his father and his younger brother. And there were times that they had to sneak under the fence, go climb trees, and get fruit for the family to eat because they were starving to death. When he got out of there, he was 13 years old and weighed 62 pounds. But that's one heck of a story that would make a great, great movie because there's so much action and drama involved in it.
Well, many of the stories that you have in this book would make great movies. Which one do you think would make the best movie?
Well, I think that one would. I think Waltz would make the best movie, but there are others as well. I think Jerry Barzak's story of being hijacked by Hezbollah terrorists would also be a great movie. He was working for, he had retired from the Navy and he was working for a contractor in Egypt. And he got permission from his employee to go home to attend his daughter's high school graduation. So he got on a plane and they took off from Cairo, TWA flight 847. But as soon as they took off, the terrorists, two of them, ran to the cockpit with guns and took over the plane. And that was a scenario that went on for several weeks and was all over the news back when that happened. I think it was 1986 when that happened. But it was all over the news and the biggest thing that was going on in the world because it was one of the first times the terrorists ever took over an airplane. And when it was over, he was interrogated by the CIA, and he told them everything. He told them what he could see out the window of where the building where they eventually put him. There was a sailor on board the airplane that was in uniform, and they shot him and threw him out the door on the tarmac. It was pretty dramatic, but that would be a great movie because there was so much going on during the whole event.
Yeah, that was such a intense event. And one of the things I have to commend you in your book, I mean, you really it's just filled with these great, not only the great narratives, but also these photos that just help to make each story stand out. Is there one that is kind of a favorite for you?
I think there is a story that's a favorite, and I'll tell you why. Um, Charlie Duke was an astronaut. He was Apollo 16. And if you watch the movie Apollo 13, you heard his name mentioned. that Ken Mattingly was not allowed to go on 13 because Charlie has measles, and Ken hadn't been had the vaccination. So anyway, he went on Apollo 16, and there are 10 photographs in the book that he supplied to me. He gave me about 20, and I picked 10 of them to go in the book, which shows the liftoff, the set down, and my favorite photo is him saluting the American flag that they left on the moon with the lander in the background. That's my favorite photograph. But the story, Charlie said, I don't want to write the story. He said, I want you to interview me and you write the story. And I said, well, okay. So I asked my 31-year-old granddaughter, Melanie Johnson, has got a photographic memory. I said, Melanie, you got to come over and help me take notes. So we put the cell phone on speaker, and we both took a set of notes. And then I took the two sets of notes and I wrote the story and I sent it to Charlie. And Charlie edited it, made sure it was accurate, and added a little bit to it. So that story was kind of unique and really fun because Charlie was involved and my granddaughter was involved, and it was team effort. It was a lot of fun to do that one.
One of the photos in your book that I really like is the cover. I think that is such a profound photo. Can you share what that is?
Yes, that's it's actually a young Marine that just graduated from Annapolis, and he's walking out of the rotunda there of Bancroft Hall and Memorial Hall of where the steps right behind him, and that's where the photographer was standing that took that picture. The mother of that Marine contracted with the photographer to take her son's picture where he was leaving Bancroft Hall, our home for 4 years, and going out into the world. And that was the genesis of that. And of course, I sent copies of the book to the mother and also to the photographer, and I got her permission to use it. We saw that actually on the cover of Shipmate magazine, and when magazine came, and I looked at the cover, I said, "That's got to be the cover of the book." And you know what? The next day, I got a phone call from my roommate, and Earl said, Jim, that's the cover that's what you ought to use for the cover of a book. I said, yeah, exactly. That's where I am. So we both agreed. And my roommate spent 30 years in the Marine Corps right after his father spent 30 years. So between the two of them, they had 60 years in the Marine Corps. Great. That's a great story too.
Wow. I mean, that comes together so nicely, and this cover does bring this book all together. It stitches it all together. One of the things that I also really appreciate is that you're bringing these historical, like personal stories of just, a time that I think many people are unaware of. Are you going to write another book?
Yeah. Well, if I get enough stories, I've got about 30 now, and I'm using a working title now of How I Met You. It started out with how I met my husband, how I met my wife, and then I decided that I'd make it How I Met You, but that may change. We've got about 31 stories, and I need about 75 or 80, something a lot more than what I have. But the stories are really, really great. I want to do a book on love and relationships, and that's what this book will be. I will have my love story in there, which is very unique, and I never get tired of talking about my wife that I lost 8 years ago, but she was absolutely the most wonderful person and the most impressive person I've ever met in my life. And I want to share with people. I think you'd be surprised at how people met how their story worked out. It's amazing. And one of the stories is somebody sent me was how they met me, and it involved a policeman. So that's kind of a funny story too.
You have so many phenomenal stories within your book. Can you touch on a few of them for us right now?
I'd like to just mention one other thing. Uh, how many people have a classmate that actually was the architect of GPS and had someone that walked on the moon and somebody went down 11,000 feet in the ocean? I just the events that my classmates were involved in were phenomenal, and I could talk about them all day and all night. And I think one of the editors that reviewed our book said this is history at eye level, and I love that definition for the book. The history department of the Naval Academy designated this book as a prime source for research, and we're so happy with that.
Well, congratulations. What a huge deal that is. My goodness. Are there stories that didn't make it in the book that you are considering for another like follow-up book to this?
No, I think the ones that did not make it to the book. I'm not doing another book on stories from my classmates. It just I think we covered the ones that are the best. I had some that didn't make it into the book. Stories had to have some value, and if they didn't have some kind of a twist to it, they were just too boring. And I wanted to make sure every story earned its way into the book, and that's the way they got into the book. They had to earn their way in. And I'll just tell you that I told one classmate, I said, "We have chosen your story for a place of honor." I said, "It will be the last story in the book because we want to leave the reader with something that they just say, wow." And his story is involved with injuries and man overboard and rescue and all the drama that was involved with it, and a lot of prayer. He was praying and calling the shots and trying to make the right decisions, and it was a very scary thing. But you know what? It turned out okay. They rescued the guy that was overboard. They found him, which was a wonder. And the people that were injured, they got them into the hospital in time to save their lives. So it was a great story, and that was a place of honor. But I tried to start off with great stories in the beginning to engage the reader, and then have some good stories in the middle and good stories at the end, because I wanted to coordinate the engagement of the reader.
Well, you definitely made this such a great read. I'm so grateful you wrote this book. Well, James, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you very much for having me. I sure enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Make sure to pick up your copy of Shake Up the World at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.